and Chairman, Institute of South Asian Studies, Professor Rajendra Sri Vatsava, Provost and Deputy President, Singapore Management University, Prof. Tan Tai, Director, Institute of South Asian Studies, Dr. S. Narayan, Head of Research and Visiting Senior Research Fellow, Institute of South Asian Studies, Mr. Vikram Khanna, Associate Editor of the Business Times, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Singapore Management University and the Institute of South Asian Studies, I warmly welcome you to this joint seminar series on challenges and strategies for doing business in India. As you know, the Indian economy is experiencing a cyclical turnaround, having recorded a growth rate of only 5% in gross domestic product in 2012-13. There are several challenges facing the economy, including a large physical and external sector imbalances, persistently high inflation, a falling rupee, and low capital inflows. While the growth rate might improve along with an improvement in global economic conditions, it is imperative for India to attract greater foreign investment for correcting the macroeconomic problems. This, however, is not an easy prospect, given that India suffers from the adverse perception of being a difficult place for doing business. Even if the government introduces more investment-friendly policies, and despite the lure of India's large market and increasing purchasing powers of the middle class, adverse perceptions might hold foreign investments back. It is said that navigating the business terrain in India can be difficult without a comprehensive understanding of its socio, political, and business culture. The country is big, and the landscape is diverse. What works in Mumbai may not always work in Bangalore or Chennai. Well, how difficult is it really to do business in India? Is the adverse perception exaggerated, or is India indeed a challenging country for doing business? How important are perseverance and well-planned strategies to succeed in India? What should be the ideal entry options for foreign investors? What are the sectors that are promising best long-term yields? Today, we have a panel of distinguished experts with hands-on experience of doing business in India and navigating through its policies and procedures, who will share their insights on these and many other questions on the minds of businessmen and employees. With these opening remarks, let us start the event. We will have each of our three distinguished speakers make their presentations. At the end of the third presentation, we will have a question and answer session, which will be chaired by an equally eminent individual, Mr. Vikram Khanna, Associate Editor to Business Times. It is now my pleasure to invite our first speaker, Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Executive Chairman, Southern Infocom, and Chairman of the Institute of South Asian Studies, to share his perspectives on the challenge and strategies for doing business in India. Ambassador Pillai, please.
Good afternoon. I think we should have had Rekha as one of the speakers. Professor Srivastava, Dr. Narayan, Mr. Vikram Khanna, Professor Tan Tai, ladies and gentlemen. I find the theme of today's seminar, challenges and strategies for doing business in India, somewhat daunting. It seems to indicate a very prescriptive approach. I'm not sure that I'm qualified to give a prescription. I must confess at the outset that I do not have, to use a term from the Gita, the king's secret for doing business in India. I'm also intimidated by the fact that I'm put together with two very eminent scholars who know India much better than I do, Professor Srivastava and Dr. Narayan. Now, having stated my limitations, I will go on to share with this very distinguished group some of my experiences in India, the experiences of my group. My group, let me define as just 4 shareholders, 4 friends who got together to look at India. With each one had a varied background, varied experience. We got together, and being subjected to the India fever contagion, which spread with the help of our former Prime Minister Gochok Tong, we decided to look at India. I will share with you experience of 3 different projects that I was involved in. The difficulties, the benefits, the challenges, the strategies, and then make some general remarks. The first one was a small outsourcing company, IT outsourcing company, which was owned by a group of British investors. They had run into problems because they expanded too fast. They set up offices all over the world, and they found that they didn't have the money to finish. And they were very much hands-on, and they got involved. Most of the work was being done out of India, but the head office was in London. The bank that they owed money to came to us to see whether we are interested to buy this company. So we went in to buy this company. The procedures were very simple because it was an offshore transaction. What we did after we bought the company was to change its corporate headquarters from London to New Delhi and make the London office into a marketing office. The Indian professionals who were working for this company were somewhat overawed by the European bosses, and they were constrained in their articulation of their views on how the company should be run. When we took over, we took the lid off and let them run. Fortunately for them, none of us had much IT experience. So they were kings, they ran, and they ran it very well. We started to make good profits. And then within a period of 2 years, we were approached by another British company, and they offered to buy us out. We had by that time listed on the second board in Delhi, and we were able to sell it at a handsome profit. We were the first IT company to cross 100 rupees. In those days, 100 rupees this was 20 years ago. And we sold and made a handsome profit. We were on the top of the world. Then we decided we'll put this money back into India and looked at something that we could invest in. And since the IT industry was growing so fast, we decided to invest in an IT trading company. And we went together with a very large IT trading company in Singapore and took the franchise for India from them. And they also became a partner. We had really done very little research on what we decided to do. We did what we wanted to do without real backing. And within the first year, maybe first 18 months, we established about 200 centers all over India. And we were on the top of the world, and we felt that we had this magic touch we brought from Singapore. But things began to go south. First, we had not really understood the market. We had not understood the products required for the Indian market. And we did not understand that the franchise system, which is very good for food, KFC or Pizza Hut or McDonald's, is really not that suitable for educational system, which needed, if you wanted to have a franchise system, you should have a very big infrastructure of staff who can monitor and control this venture. So by the second year, we found that we were in deep trouble. And then we plodded on for some more years. But this was not going to succeed. So we decided to exit. Now, the challenges one faces in exiting a company or winding down an operation in India is staggering, is frightening. You see, it is not unusual in India for people to promote companies, collect money, and then decide they disappear. And these companies will ultimately close down. So there is a perception that any company that failed must have had, because the promoters were absconding with a lot of money. So you get no protection whatsoever when you want to wind down. This is one of the problems that India needs to face, because as it grows, there will be companies that don't succeed, there will be companies that succeed. But what happened was, anybody can go to first, anyone who owes you money will not pay you. That's the first thing that happens. Second, anyone who has any connection to do with you, he'll go to some magistrate down the road, and there are plenty, and get what do you call some charge against you to say, I've been victim of cheating. And that starts a whole series of problems and so on. And to get out of that is a major, major effort. But we decided we had to go through with it. We went through with it. Fortunately, India has got very good lawyers, very good accountants, and things could be sorted out. But it took a long time, and it took a lot of, we had to bear a lot of stress while this was going on. But towards the later stages of that, we decided we are not going to be deterred by this one misstep, which was of our making, in the sense that we did not do enough study, we did not understand the market before investing this handsome profit that we had made in the previous venture. At that point of time, I had my own trading operation, and my trading partner in India, who happened to be a very large importer of newsprint, came to me to say that we should look at something called container freight stations. I'd never heard of this. This is basically in India, when containers come into the port, they are taken to us, they are evacuated, taken to a separate installation, owned not by the government but private individual, where it is de-stuffed, stuffed, distributed, and so on. So he felt that it's a port-related logistics company, and he felt that there was tremendous scope for this because the Bombay port was expanding, and a whole lot of things are going to happen in this sector, so we should go in. This time, having learned a lesson in the previous venture, we appointed somebody to take a good look at it. And they did a very good market study. The market study ascertained the viability of the project. It said could be viable. But we had to apply for land, and we went to the State Industrial Development Corporation, SID. Before that, I went to see the Minister for Commerce in Maharashtra, who welcomed me with, gave me a very good welcome and said, this is an industry which is not being developed, and your effort to go into this is laudable, and we all support. So I gathered together, because just a small group like ours could not fund, and this was an infrastructure project, could not find the resources to fund a huge project like this. So I got together a Singapore consortium comprising of various large groups, including a subsidiary of the GLC, subsidiary of the Port of Singapore. And they were very enthusiastic, and we gave them a management contract because we didn't know the business. We gave them a management contract. But as things would happen in India, it took 2 years for the land to be allocated. 2 full years. Because there was, even though it was from CIDCO, there were many problems, and we were given one piece of land and we paid for it, and then they said, oh no, you can't have this land because it's too close to water, and there is some law which says that it must be so many kilometers away from water, and therefore it was taken back. Another piece was given and said, oh no, this was actually designated to Punjab State Warehousing Corporation, and so that it was taken back. Finally we got it. But what happened in the meanwhile was that my good friends from the DLC felt that we were going nowhere, 2 years have wasted, still land not uncertain. So they withdrew. They said, no, we will not. They would go to Chennai where they could get it much faster. So I told them that that's wrong, that's a mistake, because Bombay is much, much larger port and much more active, and they should not go. But they decided to go. And they were very sure these four, fellows getting together with some others, will not be stupid enough to go into this project, which is fairly capital intensive. But I thought I should prove them wrong. So we assembled a team, partly from Singapore, partly from India, management team with knowledge on logistics. And when we finally, after 2 years, got the piece of land, we went to build this warehouse on a 36-acre site in Navi Mumbai. That was in 1998. First one. We had been established 4 years before that. So it was our first operation, but we got on to a good start, because there was only one other really good modern container freight station, and that was owned by Maersk. It was for a dedicated for their company. For a general listing, we were the first. So we had the first move advantage, and we did very well. Today, after 12, 13 years, we have got about 5 CFSs, 4 ICDs. ICDs are internal container depot with rail connection, and 17 cold stores. We have been able to build this with the profits that we made, and we have sunk it all back in, apart from, of course, paying the shareholders some dividend and so on. But when you do it properly, it can be done. And the logistics operation that we have, that's proven that. But first you must have some guts, you must be prepared to take risks, but then it can be done. But there are problems that one faces as you go along. Maybe I'll mention, I'll mention three areas which cost us problems. The first one, as I mentioned, delays. You never know when you're going to get a decision, and sometimes it takes so long, and in our case, we lost a partner because of the delays. And there is really no way of expediting the process unless you get into a. One of the things we have learned is try not to cut corners, because then that will come on you sometime later, will catch up with you. So it's better to do things the old. But eventually it will happen. When we decided that we will go in, we knew that this was a slow process. None of us were dependent on the success of this to survive. So that gave us some strength. We could survive on a whole, but this was going on. It eventually became a success. Today, in that process, we have the cold chain. We are the largest in the country. In the CFS and the rail operation, we are among the first 3. So we have been able to build this up in a relatively short time, 15 years or so, because of the fact that the industry was growing, the international trade was growing, India was opening up, and we benefited. Now, coming back to the question of problems, challenges, I think I mentioned to you the delays, which is something that one needs to take into account when you do your course work. The second one is what you might call the cost of funds, it is very, very high. And if you decide that you want to borrow offshore, then of course you must look at the exchange rate, the rupee, and the situation and so on. One needs to have a certain amount of resources lined up, and that had to be in place if you want to expand. We decided fairly early in 2005 to list the company, and that helped because that means the source of public funds is available. I think we have maintained a very good dividend, and therefore we have 48,000 shareholders, out of which about 20 to 25% are foreign institutions. Then we also have retail sort of thing. So whenever we want to tap funds, if we do not mind diluting, then there is a source. The other problem, which is dogging the country, is not only for us, is the problems faced when you want to buy land. This is a major problem in India. And in the case of the CFS, we need 25 to 30 acres, which is a big piece of land. And first, to establish the ownership is a problem, because you never know, some member from some branch of the family will turn up, and then he will come to you after you have paid the deposit to say, no, I refuse to sell this land unless you get my consent. Then you check and you find that it is true that he's actually some distant relative. There's a claim to the land. So what normally people do is about 5 generations, you go back to see whether there is some. Now, after getting the land, the next big problem is the conversion of the land, because most of this land, even if it's not cultivated, is designated as agricultural land. So what you have to do is to get it converted to industrial land, something called CLU, conversion of land use. This, as you may guess, is a major problem, and then it's all sorts of problems. Fortunately, we stumbled on a solution, and that was this: that the seller must get all approvals and sell us the land as converted land, which means some delays, which means how much higher costs. But it is much better to do that than you buy agricultural land and you try to convert it, because you get into a whole series of problems. So what we do now is we ask them, can you get conversion? You get conversion for us? Tell us how much it costs, what you pay, who you pay, we are not bothered. We just want your final price, and that works. So we have solved the problem. Now, these are problems that we face. But I think the biggest challenge that anyone going to India, any investor going to on a broader picture, is this big struggle that's going on between the political system and the economic requirements. Because the economy needs to be, certain reforms need to be in place. But these cannot happen because of political compulsions. Because, like yesterday or the day before, there's a report in our papers that, I think today, that government was going to sort of initiate reforms to insurance, telecoms, and defense, bring in foreign capital, raise the amount, and so on. I'm fairly certain in my mind that it will now see the light of day. Because when it goes onto the floor of the Parliament, there will be such rumpus, such total chaos, that you cannot really pass a legislation. Some some of my colleagues will remember that we had some Indian parliamentarians as our guests. And I raised this question. I said, how do you expect democracy to work if you don't allow the legislature to function? So the response from them was, how else can we stop it? This is the only way we can stop it. In other words, they are not interested in the process, the democratic process. They want to get their way. But this is something that one needs to look at very carefully, because if you are an investor, you are a telecoms investor, and you want to go in, what do you do? How long do you wait? But what normally happens is you wait long enough, some window will slowly open somewhere, unobtrusively, and you are vigilant enough and you notice it, you enter. States, you can work through some of the states. Here I may digress a little. Talk about two successful states, Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. Gujarat has got strong political leadership and they get through what they want. Tamil Nadu has got, in my view, not that strong political leadership, but it has excellent civil service. Many years ago, one of our leaders took a delegation, and when we went to the south, and we were talking about which are the states that one should support. And everybody enamored by Chandrababu Naidu, because he carries the PC and he can quickly tell you facts or figures, rattle it out, because he has access to that. So everybody is impressed. Modern, he was going to start cyber guard and so on. But this, our distinguished leader told us, look at the civil service. You have, in Tamil Nadu, you've got a chief minister who's covered with a blanket and the sunglasses, never opens his mouth. But the civil servants are extremely good. The other side, you've got a chief minister who talks, and civil servants are completely dumb. He said, who will you take a risk with? And his advice was, look at what happens in Tamil Nadu. And that has proven to be. Those of you who read Economist would have seen the article on Tamil Nadu a couple of months back, which was very popular. And my fear is that where is political leadership, that is driving, there's a problem that one day the leadership changes and everything turns upside down. So that is the problem. Now, I talked about the political convulsions. I must say, I'm not trying to say this is implied criticism on democracy. I mean, average countryman of mine from Singapore would say, why do you need so much of democracy? You should have some sort of little bit of a guided democracy that would be more effective. East Asia has done well with controlled democracy. I must just make two points. I feel democracy has done well for India for two reasons. One, it has kept the country together. Its deeply diverse communities have been able to adjust to each other through democracy. I remember Winston Churchill, when India was being given independence, made a statement saying that I will not preside over the dismemberment of the British Empire. He actually also meant dismemberment of India, because everybody expected India to break up, linguistic states and everything else. But it did not, because of the democratic system. The second gain of democracy is the fact that a voice was given to almost 30% of the people who had no voice. They were the deprived, backward classes, Dalits, whatever you call them. And they got a voice. And now you hear the voice, loud and clear. But the problem is, it stifles movement, because there's so much of talk, so much of noise and so on. But the voice will try and go through this with some sort of, some trepidation, but at the same time, look at it from the point of view of for long term. If you have other alternatives, you take the other one. But if you feel like the car manufacturers or power people or the larger industries, you feel you cannot ignore 1.2 billion pounds, then you must find a way to stay with this system. So, with all the many difficulties that you face, you may ask the question, why did a small group like you, 4 people, 4 shareholders, stay in India? Why did you look at Singapore? I can tell you 2 reasons again. One is that I do not think we could have built, I'm referring to the logistics industry, we could have built something of that size, of that depth in any of the modern countries of Southeast Asia, Singapore, Thailand, Kuala Lumpur. It would have been much more costly, the competition would have been much keener, and we could not have grown the way we did because India grew very fast in that sector. The second, even more significant, is the fact that we were able to do this on our own. In other words, with just the major promoters and our consortium of shareholders, without the blessing or without the interference of any godfather. We didn't have to go to a mayor, we didn't have to go to a party secretary, we didn't have to go to any godfather or ministers. In politics of the country, the politicians of the country, we were known to them and we know them, but never interfered. So I find this a very key element in a smaller group's growth. Now, let me make, I'm sorry I exceeded my time, but let me just make one point. Maybe just before that, I wanted to say that ISAS is doing a study under Dr. Amit Tandupale to survey the reaction of those who invested in India, those who are intending to invest in India, or those who have gone away from India saying that this is a terrible place. We're doing a survey and a report will be, ISAS is doing this, and I think Professor Khan and Amit Tandu will look after. There is a section of strategies. This I will leave to my betters and my elders, Dr. Professor Srivastava and Dr. Narayan. I will not deal with that. But I want to make just one point. And that is this. There is no dearth of bad news on India. A middle level officer being sent to India to study investment potential is, by the time he arrives in India, at least 25% sure. The percentages are mild. After reading the sensational stories of rape, scams, and political paralysis, that he will not want to invest. The 25% takes a quantum leap by the time he gets out of the Mumbai airport and reaches the first traffic light, because he will see this woman carrying a scrawny child with matted hair and running nose, knocking at your window. So he's sure this is not the place he wants to invest. So he makes sure that this doesn't happen. I'm not giving this as a fantasy, this story about knocking on the window. It is the truth. And I know many Singaporeans who are put off by such a thing. The greatest challenge facing a foreigner trying to do business in India is coming to terms with the country itself. If he is a mature person, he will not be perturbed by the sights and the nouns. It is essential for anyone wanting to do business in a country, to develop an empathy in that country and understand its uniqueness. India has a complex culture which will take time for anyone to understand. The country itself does not bother whether you understand it or not. It doesn't matter to them whether you think badly or you think well. They go on. A friend of mine in Bombay told me that India is part of this planet but not part of this world. There is some element of truth. India's national bird is the peacock. The peacock spreads its plumes and dances when there's thunder and lightning. I think it is time for it to dance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Pillai, for that very interesting insight. Next, may I invite Professor Rajendra Srivatsava, Provost and Deputy President, Singapore Management University, to share his insights on the topic. Professor, please.
That was fascinating, Ambassador. Ambassador Pillai made some comments that he was going to leave all the thinking and strategies to Professor Narayan and myself. I would like the audience to know that he's, amongst the three of us, he's the only one who's made money in India. So I'm going to focus more on the business side of it as opposed to policy issues. And Ambassador Pillai made the comment that the second venture he had in India, they decided to do a market analysis and make sure this time they gotten and they knew what they were doing before they jumped into it. And that's really an issue. We all know that India is a big market. So I mean, we still have to understand it. But importantly, we also have to understand what's the value proposition that we are bringing to it. So I'm just going to run through many characteristics. We all know that India is a big market. We know that in many categories, such as consumer goods, the growth rate is very high. On the other hand, there are categories that, in my opinion, are done with in terms of opportunities. So the telecom story is over, as far as I'm concerned. There may be, I think there are very good opportunities in areas like education. There are good opportunities even in the airline business, because transportation is a mess in India. So whenever there's a mess, that means there's a problem to be solved. All right, so the growth rates are high, which means it's attractive. The market is big, which means it's attractive. But the thing is, the models that we're going to be running out there are very different. Incomes are limited. Therefore, pricing has to take that into account. We're not going to get that in margins, and we have to make it up in volume. What that then means is that whatever value, whatever solution in a category that we're bringing in, it has to be replicable. You start in one area, but it has to be scalable. And then we all know the problems related with labor in India. It's the entry may be easier than exit is. Also, but at the same time, labor is relatively cheap. But it's not cheap when you take into account that it's unskilled. So if you're going to go in there, you have to skill it up, if you will, in order for that labor to become productive. And it doesn't mean that we don't need capital and technology. It means we still need the capital and technology to be able to get the scalability that is needed. So the technology and capital will provide the platform. Another thing that we all know but we seem to forget when we think of the large Indian market is that there is no one India. There are many states, and each state has its own tariff system. And so if you're going to do business in India, you have to adjust your pricing almost state by state. There's tariffs whenever you cross the state border, so it's actually no different than cross-border management in Southeast Asia. and you're still within one country. We also have different tariffs in terms of taxes, etc. By state, and that has to be taken into account. And then local governments have their own little ways of operating. So you can't operate the same way in West Bengal as you can in Bihar, which is the state next door. So what does it all add up to? It adds up to a lot of complexity. And if I were to put Singapore on one side of complexity, which is simplicity, India would be at the other extreme of complexity, and somewhere in the middle would be, let's say, the United States. And would you go into, let's say, a large market like the US, which is more homogeneous, this, that, and the other, if you didn't know much about it? Would you like to go into it yourself, or would you like to get a partner to help you with it? So if you're going to get a partner in the US, you better get a partner if you're going to India, somebody who knows what the differences are between the states, somebody who really understands the language barriers, the cultural issues, and so on and so forth. And then we have aspirations. Let's not forget that even though India is a poor country, I keep running into people with very little money who love grants. So there's aspirations out there, and even people who are not very well off are looking forward to owning something that they can be proud of. So let's not just think of going into the basics. So let me try to take you through one example of how one might have to do things and how that is related to the kind of comments that I've just made. As I mentioned, that telecom is a vast story. Ambassador Pillai mentioned that when you land in the airport in Mumbai, and if you're 25% unsure, by the time you hit the first red light, you are 80% unsure. So what happens, amongst the many issues that India faces, energy, water, sanitation, sustainability, etc., etc. So let me just pick up on the example from Ambassador Pillai. I come out at the airport, and I'm lucky enough that somebody has arranged for me to be picked up. So what happens as you exit? You will have people holding pieces of paper, sometimes hotel placards, etc., etc. So you are hit with 100 people holding stuff for you. And it's very, very hard to figure out who's the person who's really picking you up. Simple solution to that is, if a cab driver is picking you up, and you know that person's phone number, rather than searching for him amongst 100 people, you just call that phone number, and they spot you. Once you've gotten the driver, next time you go, if it's the same driver, it's easier for him to spot you coming out of one line than for you to spot him with the 100 people standing there. So there's a company there called Merocabs. And they started with looking at what's going on in Singapore, with our cab system. And they took the model, all the GPS connections, the technology, etc., but they took the model into India. And the question is, how do you add value in the Indian context? Now, we in Singapore are very impatient. So when I call up for a cab, and they say, 5 to 7 minutes, I said, why can't they do it faster? And I'm happier when they say 3 to 5 minutes. Well, the issue in India is not 3 to 5 minutes or 5 to 7 minutes. It's a question, are they going to show up at all? And so what really helps is if you are working with a company and it's the same cab driver who's picking you up every time you're going there, the cost of labor is lower. So you can get the same car and the driver for the equivalent of about 40 Singapore dollars a day. And so there's no waiting involved. And on the other hand, if you just want to hire by the kilometer, etc., the price is very, very low. It's only about 30 to 40 cents per kilometer. But what I'm trying to impress is that it's the labor cost in India that is cheap, that allows you to have the car for the whole day, and therefore you don't get into the business of calling. So Merocabs, they thought they were going to follow the Singaporean model, but they were not sure if it would work and how the value proposition would have to be re-engineered in India. So they started out with putting the toe in the water strategy. Let's see if it works someplace. And that someplace was Mumbai. And very quickly it worked out there because it's a major issue, transportation. Then the second expansion was into Delhi. From Delhi they went to either Hyderabad or Bangalore, and they're all over the place now. And they started with 30 cabs in Mumbai, and I think they are close. I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but it's got to be close to 10,000 cabs now. So the scalability is there, but you have to figure out what model is, what the model will be in Mumbai and how that model has to be changed. So the model in Delhi isn't exactly the same. They've made some local kind of adjustments. All right, so we've talked about labor, we've talked about what the value proposition is. We've talked about how the technology provides the scalability and also provides for enhanced productivity of the cabs and the cab driver. The issue then now is, okay, where does capital come in? And the model that Meru Cabs has been following is they want the operator of the automobile to be the owner. And what Meru Cabs is doing is actually negotiating with the manufacturers on behalf of the multiple owners, so they can get a lower price. They provide the operator services in terms of maintenance. So they're taking certain headaches out and they're empowering individuals to be able to own the asset. Now, in order to do that, somebody has to have capital. And we just heard that capital in India is very expensive. You can bring in foreign capital, but then you face the risk. The Indian rupee in the last year has gone down from about 45 rupees per US dollar to 60. So there's a big depreciation of your foreign assets. So your return rate has to be high enough in order to take into account some of these risks. And so either it's going to have to be a private equity investment from outside, or it's going to have to be an internal investment. So the capital is going to be needed in order for this thing to work. So we need both labor and capital, and then we need to look at the business model that's going to generate it. So I'm just going to lick my fingers because I don't know the exact numbers. But conservatively, let's say in the US, we could get about 8%, 8.5% net margin, net profitability per dollar of sales. Let's say in India the margins are going to be lower and I get about 4%. Okay, just generating. Because we are labor intensive and not capital intensive, the asset turnover, which is sales divided by assets, is going to be more like 6 or 7 to 1. So when I multiply the margin by this turnover, that gives me return on assets. So 4 multiplied by, let's say, 6 is 24% return on assets. If I leverage that 2 to 1 in terms of assets to equity, so now 24 multiplied by 2, which is 48% return on equity. I mean, I'm doing this, just licking my finger and doing this kind of analysis. Now, what we can bank on in India is lower margins, I agree. What we can bank on in India is relatively high over asset turnover, capital turnover. All right? And in terms of leverage, that's up to the arrangements that we can make, but we can typically get 2 to 1. So in my opinion, if we're doing things right in areas where there's demand, where we have actually done the analysis, gone through this whole issue of demand versus supply, including who the competitors are going to be, then these kinds of returns are feasible, which are not going to be feasible in an environment where the competition is more intense. And that's the point Ambassador just made. Now, it doesn't mean that in India there's not going to be any competition, because as soon as people saw Meru Cab as being successful, then we had 4 other competitors come in with approximately the same business model. Fortunately, the market is big enough, for right now for all these companies to be able to coexist. So, to quickly summarize, I think when we're looking at emerging market like India, despite the complexities, we resolve the complexity issue by trying to get a partner, or going into a joint venture. It could be private equity kind of arrangement. It could be a joint venture. We should also be doing a market analysis to see what is the value proposition. And in areas like FMCG, fast food, F&B, the market is tremendous, so there's money to be made. Of course, you have to take risks. If you're not sure what we're doing, we put in a toe in the water kind of strategy, whether we call it phased growth, or sometimes people call it the string of pearls strategy. If you're not sure, that's the way of developing the options. In terms of, we have to come up with a replicable solution, because unless we have the scalability, you're going to be stuck with small margins, and it's not going to pay off. And the opportunity for growth, in my opinion, is going to increase, but the biggest stumbling block are the policy issues that Ambassador referred to. And the government really needs to understand that investors are not only looking at risk, they're looking at return. I was flabbergasted when in the telecom case, the position was taken, okay, this is getting too complex, we're going to make a decision next year. Making a decision next year wasn't any reprieve, and it certainly just propagated even more uncertainty as to what is going to happen. So what needs to be done on the Indian side really is looking at ways to mitigate risk and to mitigate these hurdles for getting business done. Because if your business model is that you're trying to get returns back in 5 years, and that gets pushed to 10 years, you need really, really patient capital. And the capital isn't that patient, because capital just follows global opportunities. And the capital will go wherever the opportunity is. And we are seeing in the last couple of months, that capital is moving out of India, and that is not good. So I'll save other things for Q&A, but thank you. And
Thank you, Professor Srivatsava. May I now invite our final speaker, Dr. S. Narayan, Head of Research and Visiting Senior Research Fellow at ISIS. Dr. Narayan, please.
Mr. Pillai, Professor Srivastava, it's very difficult to follow because everything has been said. So what I will try to do is to try and take a slightly different track and look at this issue in a very kind of a little bit of a structured manner. What are the kind of challenges that are getting faced by businesses doing business? And what are the opportunities of tackling these challenges? Some of the challenges that we have actually goes back to colonial era, in the sense that we have a lot of laws which goes back to 1880. We have Land Acquisition Act till 1884. We have a labor law till 1864. We have a fire safety law which is 1895, which requires that to protect against fire, you should have, every factory should have a bucket full of sand available in the corner. I think this is the law. You may have the most modern fire extinguisher, but if you don't have the bucket full of sand, you're violating that law. I recently, a couple of weeks back, my brother-in-law, he runs a small automobile parts manufacturing thing, and he was hauled up by the labor court. And he was hauled up by the labor court because the labor inspector had said that as per law, you're supposed to have a creche in every factory, and you don't have a creche. So he was before the labor court, and he said, but all the people, there are only 25 employees, there are 12 girls, and all of them are unmarried girls. So there's absolute silence in the labor court. He looked at him quite seriously. What's he saying? He said, no, all of them are unmarried girls. But then the judge said, what does it have to do with having a creche? Full stop. So the interpretation of the legal aspects of the law can get to be considerably, I would use the word petty, at the implementation level. This is actually a serious problem for those people who are doing businesses. So I think I'll address this as to how to tackle this when I go along. So I would say my point number one is old laws, rigid laws. Mr. Pillai mentioned the land acquisition law. The problem with the land acquisition law and the land problem is not that there is so much agitation about acquisition. The problem is in the original law. The original law said that government can acquire land for a public purpose. Now, at that time, in 1894, a public purpose really meant that in a village you put up, let's say, a post office, a bank, a police station, a sub-jail, a government office, etc. That was public purpose. Then round about the 50s or 60s, government said, developing industry is a public purpose. I am going to buy land and give it over to industries to develop. And therefore, when I'm buying it, I'm not holding the land, but I'm giving it to a public purpose. But if you really look at it very carefully, it's not really a public purpose. You're acquiring land from somebody and giving it away to somebody else, from actually the landholders who are peasants. And then you give it to industries who are actually capitalists, if you think in those terms. And this dilemma is what has enlarged, because once this was available, then big people, I must mention names we are here, that if you think about the West Bengal controversy which happened over the car factory, the point was that the owners wanted close to 800, 900 acres of land. You really need that kind of land for setting up a car factory. Can you not do it in less? The kind of land that has been occupied by steel plants and by public sector units is far in excess of what would be considered rational. And I think that arises from the fact that this kind of interpretation happens. So there is a reaction. There is a reaction to say, listen, land is not a free asset, a cheap asset. It's not an inexhaustible asset. Make sure that you take the kind of a land that you need for the factory and make sure that you pay the people who are in disagreement. This is the debate which is going on. And for me, I'm certainly on the part of the people who are advocating this. Okay, the methodologies, the approaches, the numbers may be different, but certainly the old act cannot stand. And this is so for many of the legislations. And quite apart from legislation, there are rules, regulations which come in, which all need to be looked at. So I would say the first issue of doing business is the antiquity of the laws and the need to make some changes in those laws. And this is what ongoing businesses face on a day-to-day basis. Added to this is the complexity that not only are new laws coming in, but sometimes the courts make interpretations of these laws which are perhaps not relevant to the situation which the companies are facing. And some of those interpretations, therefore, open up a lot of worries and anxieties to the investors. In the area of regulation, I would look at 4 or 5 areas which bother people. One is, of course, labor regulation. Labor regulation, the difficulties of hiring and firing people, or particularly firing people. Mr. Pillai already mentioned the problems of closing down businesses, firing people. We had an incident in the Maruti factory, Suzuki factory last year in Delhi, where there was a conflict between the contract labor and the regular labor. But if you again look at it very carefully, what was the conflict about? The management, because it could not hire and fire labor fast enough, employed a lot of contract labor, but decided that the contract labor would be paid far lower, would not be given the benefits of provident fund, health, etc., and paid far lower than the regular labor. So in the same workstation, you have 2 people getting paid very different salaries. So you are breeding conflict. So I would really say that this is not a policy problem, this is not an implementation problem, this is purely a problem of I would say, in some ways, unfair practice at the workplace. But if you ask the management, they would say, but if this guy is bad, give me a way out. Tell me a way of firing him, then I don't want contract labor. I'll hire everybody if there is mobility of labor that is provided for. So there is an interface between the way the business looks at the problem and the government looks at the problem. And this is the interface which needs to be actually sorted out. It is the same when you come to environment pollution, which is again becoming a fairly large issue here. We have a situation where we have a very interesting situation. In the south, in Tamil Nadu, there is one particular belt which is very famous for leather. So there's a lot of leather dyeing industries, and the leather dyeing industries were putting their pollutants into the river. So the government came up with the program that okay, let's have a zero pollution emission standard, and let the government put up a cooperative unit for cleaning up the environment. And that particular unit would be run by everybody, and everybody would have to give his waste there, and therefore you get zero pollution in the environment. Over a period of time, what happened was that, let us say there were 100 units on that belt. Some of the units actually closed down. Some of the units closed down, did not work well, so okay. So as against 100 units, you have 60 to 70 units. Now if you reduce the capacity of that particular pollution station, then the amount of clean water that is discharged actually changes considerably. The technology of, you can't, I mean, if you have 100% clean water coming out of 100 factories, if you have 60 factories putting water, you don't get clean water out, you do get some pollutants. Okay, so the people revolt. So these are again, would you call it a legislative problem? Would you call it a business problem? I think it's a combination of those problems. Somebody should have got together in the middle, improved the technology to make sure it works. And these cooperative things beyond the stage, I mean, it's okay initially, beyond the stage don't work. People should have been encouraged to put up their own pollution removal factories or whatever it is. So I do like to make the point that yes, there are regulatory issues, there are kind of inspectorate issues, but there are also issues from the point of business where there is not a quick enough response and reaction to try to solve the problem in a coordinated manner along with the government. And I think this is I would put this in one box. For the Madras Chamber of Commerce, we, I mean, a small group, including me in Chennai, we are doing a kind of very detailed study of what are the actual regulatory issues in running a business that as you face. Like I said, the setting up the crash, the fire bucket kind of issues. And is it possible, therefore, to go back to government and say, these rules are no longer required. Just remove these rules, which are antiquated, which are antediluvian, which are not relevant for current. And I do think that we will be able to come out with a list of some 40 or 50 or 60 kind of rules and regulations which do not pertain to, in various laws which relate to running a business, we'll be able to come up with some recommendations. A lot of them can be removed by executive order. And we do think that certainly, I mean, I'm fairly confident about my state of Tamil Nadu, that certainly by this time next year, a lot of these irritants would get removed just by executive order. It's just that people have not taken the trouble to identify. Everybody has anecdotes, everybody has a backstory, everybody has a back experience. But I think it's the first time that the chamber has got together to try to identify all these and then go back to government and say, these are real problems, can't you get rid of them? And and we are strongly supported by the government in saying, okay, tell us what you want to remove the fire bucket, whatever. So I think this is one progress that we are really trying to do. The second area is, so this is I would call the law and regulation. The second area is, of course, what I would call the provision of the government. I think both Mr. Pillai and Professor Srivastava have already talked about infrastructure problems. The time taken to port, the logistics problem to the port. I mean, compared to today, mean, if I take, let's say, Delhi Mumbai is the most congested road transportation corridor. The time has gone down from, let's say, 10 years ago, from 2002. The time was close to about 16 to 18 hours. It's come down to 12 hours. But 12 hours is still too long. It has come down to about 8 to 10 hours. Okay. But this is a 20-30% improvement because the road network is definitely improved. Again, in the southern parts, the road network is so much better than it was about 8 to 10 years ago. So movement is really very much faster, and you have larger multi-axle vehicles which are moving there. The third, of course, is, again, this was mentioned. The third, of course, is really knowledge about what you're going to sell, where you're going to sell, and when you're going to sell. And I think this is extremely crucial. I mean, India is a very, very diverse country. The problem of most foreign companies investing in India is that they take India as India. I mean, we don't, Sudapal and we don't even eat the same food. I mean, it's totally different. So it's absolutely, there's nothing in common between the kind of habits in the north and the habits in the south, and the kind of practices, the kind of business practices. What a lot of things which happen by word of mouth do not happen by contract in several parts of the country. So I think this most of the external businesses don't understand. I have two recent examples of how multinationals are approaching this problem. One, again, I'm mentioning names without their permission, but it's a very good example. One is Daimler. Daimler has come into India very recently. They started their factory in September last year. And they are manufacturing, they decided to take the Tata and Ashok Leyland, which are big truck manufacturing companies. They decided to take them head on. That means they make the same kind of vehicles for the same kind of loads, for the same kind of roads. Right? But they are pricing their own vehicles about 10% higher. So they decided to do two things. One, they decided that they would introduce an engine which is more fuel efficient. So they have the technology to do that. They decided that they would give a slightly higher engine power within that same chassis. And third, most importantly, while Tata and Ashok Leyland send out their trucks just on the bare bed basis, these people said, we'll build the driver comfort, we'll build the air conditioned cab, we'll build a power steering, we'll give comfort to the guy who's going to sit there 14 hours a day. And today we are talking of 10 months. I mean, and while the commercial vehicle sales have come down in the country, and Tata and Ashok Leyland today are offering 10-15% discounts, so the price differential today is 20-25%. Daimler has a long waiting line. They are ramping up from 600 vehicles a month to 2,000 per day. Because they understood, they spent time on understanding that. Another company is a Japanese company, trucks, etc. And they have plans that they will not put the first manufacturing plant before 2016. They are marketing now. They are bringing in vehicles and marketing, studying the market, selling. They are setting up distributorships. They are going about things so methodically. They don't want to move without getting environmental clearances, without getting, they have a huge setup which is waiting for, which is really planning for about 3 to 4 years. And I think this is perhaps another major hesitation on the part of all foreign investors is to invest in a market study, to invest in that area, to find out what exactly is happening, what will sell, what will not sell, how it will sell, what are the methods of distribution. And I think if you look at the kind of examples of Barista or even the first round of McDonald's investments in India, this was the where you put up a McDonald's shop is very important, because locations even in the city, from one point of the city to the other point of the city is totally different. Okay, you put a McDonald's store next to a dosa shop and you're in for disaster. So I think I would echo what Professor Srivastava is saying, that very important to invest in a study, very important to invest in somebody who knows, who can identify opportunities which vary from state to state, the market conditions there, data. A lot of data is just not available. Data has to be collected. Market research, I sit on a board of a company called Dabur, and they have been around for I think 4 generations. They are not yet into the south. They are not comfortable getting into the south because they feel that they don't know enough of the southern taste to sell their product. Whether a red toothpaste, monkey brand red toothpaste will sell in the south, which it sells in Bihar, Bandar Chowk, I don't know, they don't know it yet. So I think the markets are so distinctly diverse that it's very, very important to find out the diversity, to spend a little money and have an investment. And this is my suggestion to investors here. And finally, I would say, what are the opportunities? Today, with the rupee falling sharply against the dollar, I find that the entire range of light engineering industry, particularly the auto ancillary industry, is looking extremely buoyant. Not only are all the big manufacturers already there, the Toyota is there, the Honda is there, the BMW is there, Mercedes is there, but all these people are now wanting to export parts back to their OE. So I see in the last 5 or 6 months, particularly the last, that there's a huge demand for the light engineering industry products. Well, this is not engineering alone. It includes the electronics which is associated with it, it includes the plastics which is associated with it, includes the tires, everything. The other area, of course, the very big area is the pharmaceutical area. In fact, the whole world is now this 2030, by next year, nearly over 250 drugs will be off patent. Their WHO drugs will get off patent. And India is obviously the source of manufacturing of a lot of drugs here. The third is a very peculiar area, and it is going to, I really don't know where the strategy came from, but the fact is that by the end of the next couple of years, we're going to have 300 million tons of petroleum refining capacity in the country. Not just Reliance alone, but a lot of people together. 300 million tons is huge. The total consumption in India of petroleum product is only about 160, 170 million tons. So to be able to bring in the crude, to convert it into products, and perhaps to convert it into petrochemicals, and to be able to sell it in the rest of the world, people have taken a huge entrepreneurial call on this, and I think this is going to work out because the refining margins in India are among the best in the world. They're not the old refineries of the public sector, but believe that they are among the best in the world, which means they are making money. They are bringing crude from Venezuela and sending it back to America. I think it's still working out, and also petrochemicals. So petrochemicals, there's another area which is coming out as a very big area. Finally, of course, housing. Housing, which means that there's a big housing boom because every Indian wants to own a house. So when you talk about housing, people are upgrading anything to do with houses. You talk about furniture, you talk about doors, you talk about windows, you talk about lighting, you talk about wash basins and faucets, etc. The entire hardware industry. You talk about designing, you talk about landscaping. All this industry is absolutely booming. These are kind of huge opportunities which are happening. And if you look at this particular list, and this list is fairly free of government intervention and government politics and government policy. So that is why we say, I keep saying, and Mr. Pillai doesn't believe me, that in spite of all this, India will continue to grow at 6 to 7%. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Narayan. May I request you to take your seat on stage, please? I would now like to invite Mr. Vikram Khanna, Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, and Professor Rajendra Srivatsava to join Dr. Narayan on stage for the question and answer session.